I'm excited and I'm enjoying this stuff. I hope you're loving it too. We just looked at siblings. We saw how those worked. We looked at methods. Before siblings, remember what we looked at? We looked at parents. But what is the love of every parent? That is right. Let's have some kids. Parents love their children. And you may be thinking this is going to be just as easy as the others, and let me warn you, it's not. When it starts getting to children, we've got a lot of methods available to us, and some of them, aren't as intuitive as the others, but it's okay. That's what I'm here for, and that's what we're going to look at. Firstly, I want us to begin by looking at the first and second child methods. Okay, so how does first and second child work? Firstly, the syntax of the method is first child and last child. And first child and last child properties refer to a parent's first and last child elements. Let me show you what I mean. Let's start at that div tag. How does that H2 relate to it? Well, as you could guess, that is the first child of the div. If we look at the paragraph tag, as you would suspect, it's the last child of the div. Again, let's look at it from the main element's point of view. Its first child is the H1 tag, its last child is the div tag. But now what about this body element? Here we can see that the parent, this body, only has one child. Well, in this case, it's not that difficult. We can deduce that first child and last child will point to exactly the same element. What about if an element doesn't have a child? Look at our H1 tag. Doesn't have any children, does it? In that case, these properties are going to return null. So first child and last child will return null. At this point, you might be thinking, man, this is super simple. But the tricky one compared to the other properties we've looked at so far is the children property. This is just a little bit more tricky, but again, with a bit of practice and a bit of practical examples, you'll see it's not that difficult. When you access the children property on a parent, you're basically getting a collection of child elements the parent has. Does that make sense? And remember, we looked at the access methods in the DOM, and we saw that some of those methods like get elements by class name, get elements by tag name, they returned collections. It's the same here. But as we saw in previous lectures, when we used get elements by tag name, class name, etc., although those collections looked like an array, they weren't a true array. So bear that in mind. Although it looks and feels like an array, in this case, when we access the children property, it's not a true array. But we can iterate through the collection process or access the children individually, just like we're going to be seeing in our examples and like we did previously. And FYI, quickly, the collection returned to us from this children property does have that automatic length property that tells us how many items are in the collection. And that, of course, allows us to loop through it. If your head is spinning right now, please don't worry. We're going to code and we're going to see what this all looks like shortly. So let me just show you kind of how this children property works. But this time I want to start at the top. If we're looking at the body and we're looking at its children, and say we want to access that main element, all we would have to do was we will start with the body, we will access its children property, and to get the first item in that collection, just like an array, we access it from its index number. And we know in JavaScript and many other languages and the DOM API, the very first item in an array starts at position 0. So that's not that difficult. What about now if we're wanting to get that H1 tag and we add the main element? How would we do that? Again, we start at the main element, we access its children property, and we access the first item in that array. It's intuitive. And with the div, we know that that's its second child. So we access the main element, we access its children property, but this time we access the second item in the array, which of course will return us that div element. Of course, we can do exactly the same process with the H2 and the P, but this time we're using the div as the starting point to get the children. Hope it's making sense, but now I really do want to jump into the console. This is an important topic for us to master. I'll see you now.